Welcome everyone to tonight's webinar. My name is Rafi Shulman and I'm the co-founder of Olim Advisors. It's a pleasure to have you here tonight, and I just want to take a moment and introduce you to the individuals who are joining me tonight. Darren Rich from Home in Israel, which is the real estate group we work with in Netanya. Avram Levinsky, who has his law firm, Avram Levinsky Law Firm, and Natan Nagar, who works for Omega Financial Resources, and he's the mortgage broker who's going to be sharing his insights. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. We really appreciate your time, and we look forward to getting your advice. We have over 200 people who have registered from around the world, and I always find it so inspiring. And really, it's such a great opportunity to share with you information, to guide you, to give you some advice, whether it's about buying a home in Israel, about making Aliyah. That's what we're here for, and we're happy to help you. Before we get started, I just want to share with you a few quick things. We are recording the webinar, so if you have to leave early or if you come late, don't worry about it. We'll send out an email within the next couple of days with a link to the recorded webinar so you can watch it again at your convenience. Also, if you know people who weren't able to join us tonight and could benefit from this information, please feel free to send it out to them as well. We're also going to do a Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the Q&A window, and we'll try and get to as many of those questions as we can. And the last thing is we will include our contact information. And so we really want to encourage you to reach out to us. We know that everybody has a different situation, different goals, different concerns, and we won't be able to get into all the details in tonight's webinar. So please reach out to us. We will also reach out to you, but there's 200 of you, and it's just going to be very challenging for us to get through to everyone. So send us an email, send us a text, send us a WhatsApp message, give us a call. Let us help you. Let us share information, guide you, and help you in any way that we can. Before we get started, I just want to share with you for a couple of minutes a little bit about who we are and why we host these webinars. So if you go back in time to 2016, my partner Laura Yitzhaki and I realized and recognized that there are a lot of people who want to buy a home in Israel. There are a lot of people who want to make Aliyah to Israel, and they just look at the process and they realize that this process is just too complicated, too daunting, too overwhelming. And unfortunately, a lot of people just put their hands up and say, you know what, this is just not for me. Maybe I'll do it in 5 years from now, or maybe I'll never do it. And we felt that this is something that you can absolutely do with a little bit of help, a little bit of guidance. And that's what we set out to do in 2016, is to help you find the right community, find the right project, find the right apartment, find the right people to work with, especially if you're buying a home in Israel. Whether you live in Israel or outside of Israel, you need to make sure that you have the right people to guide you through the process. And the same applies to those of you who are thinking about making Aliyah. We're here to help you make those pre-Aliyah decisions, those decisions that are so important, like finding the right community, finding schools for kids if you have kids, finding the right apartment. And then once you get to Israel, we're here on the ground to help you deal with the bureaucracy, to help you open up your bank account, deal with the government, get all the benefits and the rights that you deserve, and then provide you with ongoing support as you adjust to life in Israel. So I guess the message that I'm really trying to convey to you is that, yes, this is an overwhelming process, and yes, it can be daunting, but with the right help, it's absolutely doable. And that's really what we're here. And thank God, over the past 8 years, we've literally helped thousands of people make Aliyah to Israel, adjust to life in Israel, and buy a home in Israel. So don't go through this process by yourself. Let us help you and let us guide you throughout the process. So with that, Avram, I'd like to turn it over to you, and we can begin with your part of the presentation. Avram, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Do you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So we start and represent now and explain about purchasing a property in Israel, the legal aspects. Yeah, we can move to the next slide and we'll start. Yeah. So I want to start with a very interesting topic, which is very, very relevant, I believe, to all of you guys, and it's also very much new. It's from the last days. That means most of the people not really understand exactly, and I got many questions. Me, Rafi, and I'm sure many others just wanted really to understand what is the new update of the purchase tax. What exactly the new legislation, what is the difference, what's new? So let's go into the details and explain exactly what's the story. If you see all the time when we speak about the tax, I just left in the left side the flag, the Israeli flag, because the reason is because we need to understand the main idea here is to support Aliyah, and therefore the new legislation came due to the Gaza war. Due to the Gaza war, the Israel government decided that they want to support more and more Aliyah, people like you guys that want to do Aliyah. And now, after I explained that, all the time when we see the flag in my slides, this is the topic we are going to speak, the new updated legislation. Now, I would like to start and to speak briefly about the tax in the process, not specifically for new Olim. Just let's take a moment and explain the purchase tax. Let's look on the first line. Purchase tax for Israelis, second property versus first properties. What do we mean here? Here we have two options, very, very simple. If you're an Israeli, you have only two options. If you're buying a property, this is your sole property. There are no any other properties that you owned. This is your property. You are paying very, very cheap purchase tax. I don't want to go into the numbers because the tax is differential. That's mean we have steps, and let's say from 0 till more or less 2 million, you pay 0 tax. From 2 million to 2.5, you pay 3%, let's say, etc. But if this is your first property, you pay 0 taxation, 0 tax. And if this is your second property, you pay 8% tax from the first shekel. So this is very simple. This is the first line. This is for Israelis. This is very simple. Now let's speak about foreigners. If someone is living abroad, which is starting to be, I guess, more relevant to some of you, if someone is living abroad, he pays 8% tax. No question if this is his first property, his second property. If someone is living abroad, this is the default. He pays 8% tax. Why? Because the view of the law is this is as an investment for him, and this is due to the fact that this is investments like second property, same property considered to be investment. And also, if someone is living abroad, living in the US and buying a property, the law says this is investment. Okay. And now we're going to move to the next slide. The next slide will explain us exactly the new update for new Olim. And this is very special because even if you are a foreigner and you live still in the US, you can still use this benefit. So let's speak now deeply about that. Number one, I want to explain about the principles of this new legislation. So number one, I would like to give a short, not too short, but I want to explain shortly the 3 reasons why they did this new benefit. Number one, as I mentioned in the beginning, the Israeli government wanted to support Aliyah. This is number one, because of the Gaza war, because of the situation, we want to give more and more the opportunity for more and more people to do Aliyah with good conditions. This is number one. This is the one principle. Second principle, second idea, second reason why they created this new legislation is that in many occasions in the previous wording of the law, there was a very silly situation when if someone did Aliyah, he would pay more than Israeli that did not do Aliyah. So let's say if I'm an Israeli, I'm buying a property in 3 million shekel, let's say, be more cheap for me, the tax, than if any one of you will do Aliyah and use the benefit. So then, what the point? We can just use the Israeli benefit just like any other. And this is indeed what happened when the tax authority gave the details and the data to the government. They saw that many thousands of Olim did not use this benefit because of this very silly situation. So these are the 2 principles I spoke, and that giving you the idea why even there was this change. And now I had one more principle which I wanted to share with you, which is that the previous situation gave new Olim the option to buy 2 properties very cheap with very cheap tax, and now this is cancelled. So now what we are going to do now is to go into the actual conditions, and then we see also the table that gives you that to understand like the explanation of all what I just mentioned very briefly. So number one, the conditions. Let's speak about the conditions. The conditions for this benefit for new Olim are very, very simple. Number one, you need to buy the property either 1 year before the Aliyah or up till 7 years after you already did Aliyah. So let's say you are now living in New York You can buy the property 1 year before you do the Aliyah, or if you did Aliyah already, came to Israel, you still have 7 years to use this benefit. Now, there are some situations that the 1 year period Aliyah transaction can be even 3 years, okay? In which occasions? For example, when the property is under construction and when the property is not ready yet. So this is depending, every occasion is there is no any absolute answer here, but just keep in mind that when you buy a property, you need to be advised and you need to check either 1 year until 7 years after Aliyah, you can maybe use it, and maybe in some occasions even 3 years before the Aliyah. Now, the second condition is the purchase property is the sole property of the purchasers and is the purchaser in Israel. So this what I said, that now in this moment the new legislation are determined that you cannot buy 2 properties with this very good benefit, but you have to have 1 property only in order to get this benefit of new Olim. So we spoke about the timing. We spoke about the fact that it has to be your sole property when you buy a property, even if you are Oleh. And now I want to look on the next table, please, Rafi, and I will show you exactly. Yeah.
I'm sorry, just one quick question. The law goes into effect, I believe, August 15th, right? So that means that any properties bought before that, this is not retroactive. You can't buy a property a few weeks ago or a few months ago and apply. No. It's only, is August 15th, is that correct? Is that the...
as far as that's right. And also it's very good comment. Yeah, the law, I think never can be retroactively because people needs to know what is the current situation when they're buying, either if they are selling, if they are buying. Today someone asked me a question about retroactively, because today the Hatzmada, the linkage, was changed like a year ago. We'll speak about it maybe later in the process, but any law in Israel and in the modern law, world cannot be retroactively in general. So let's give some examples, and we see how the benefit of new Olim is much more big, much more strong, and much more. Let's look. So let's start with this first example. If someone is buying in more or less 2 million shekel, okay, 1978. Let's say it's 2 million shekel. So for every Israeli, if this is the sole property, he will pay 0. For new Olim, okay, the old legislation, he will pay almost 10,000 shekel. If for new Olim, now after the new legislation will be valid, it will be again 0, just like Israeli. So number one, we see already even in a cheap property, it's very good benefit. Already we save 10,000 shekel just without doing nothing. Let's go to the second line, 3 million. If we will buy a property with 3 million shekel, we will see unbelievably good benefit. If you're an Israeli, first property, you're buying property, you pay 45,000 shekel as a tax. New Oleh, this was a silly situation I told you before, would pay even more, 60,000 shekel for that. And the new legislation determined only 5,000 shekel, more or less, will be paid by New Oleh. It actually means nothing when you look about the whole transaction. 3 million shekel to pay 5,000 shekel as a tax is nothing. And also you can see the same in 4 million shekel. You see 4 million shekel is any Israeli pay 95,000 or 110 if you are new Oleh with the old legislation. And again, 10,000 shekel if you are new Oleh and for the new legislation that's going to be, as Rafi mentioned, valid on 15th of August. Now, the limit, this is the reason I'm giving you these 2 last numbers. The limit of all of that is 6.5 million. 6.5 million, this is the limit for the benefit for new Oleh. And you will see that new Oleh would pay the past 235,000 shekel, and Israeli would pay 233,000 shekel, and new Oleh would pay 22,000 shekel. So we know that until, if we're buying, this is the bottom line, which is really, really important. If you're buying a property which is price, the price is until 6.5 million shekel, you could do a very, very, very good transaction. You see that in the 6.5, you would save more than 200 shekel. Okay, this is amazing. Now, this is the last point, and then Rafi will be happy also if you have to say something. So you see, if you pay 1 more shekel, you see the last line. 6,501 shekel. The law said you're ready as new Olim, you will be compared, you will pay the same tax as any Israeli. So just be very, very aware. Now, those numbers will be changed every year, every year being updated, the linkage and everything. So every year you need to check it, and even now, maybe we need to check every time exactly to make sure that that you not exceed the price for no reason and pay a lot of tax. Raf, you want to say something? Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Okay, so again, that's the idea. Sold property that just don't exceed 6.5, and check the numbers. Now, if you already made Aliyah, let's say you're now in Israel, so you should speak with a lawyer to discuss your personal situation. Why? Because the law now, the new legislation gives Olim that already did Aliyah the option to choose between the old wording of the law and the new wording of the law. And this can be very good also for tax reasons. Also, to choose the old version can be very, very good for some situations, okay, that can save you a lot of money. I don't want to go into that, but keep in mind, if you're already the Aliyah, if you live in Israel, you need to discuss it, okay? That's all for the tax, and for sure, anyone that would like to speak and ask any questions, you're more than welcome. Now, I want to give you a few more details about the process of purchase property. And we will speak firstly about, very briefly, I would like to speak about the 4 first points, because they are very general and not unique to you guys that you do Aliyah. And after that, we speak about about points 5, 6, and 7, which are unique to your occasion. So number 1, when we buying a property, first of all, for sure, you need to find a property. For this, you have realtors, you have your Darren that can explain about that. And this is the first thing you need to do. You need to find a property. And this is point number 1. You can choose the community you want, the city you want, etc., 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 etc. Number 2, you need to close the price and the schedule of payments, which is also very obvious. I think today someone called me, it was either today or yesterday, and told me that if I will be able to assist him with the price of the apartment. I told him, listen, you need to close the price before you start any legal process. Firstly, find the property, close price, and then you can move to the lawyers, which is number 3 and number 4. Number 3, explain about the due diligence. Due diligence is very, very important. To my belief, this is the most important thing in the process, more than any word that we'll put in the contract, more than any whereas, any clause that we'll put. Due diligence is very, very important. And the most of the due diligence the lawyers do, check that the deed is okay, there's no lien, and nothing looks strange, etc., etc., etc. Even though I want to give you 2 very important things that I think any one of you will take with, if you will remember that, it will be sufficient for all of us. So number 1, keep in mind that very recommended to do one thing, which is physical inspection of the property. I can tell you many stories about that, but yeah, it's really, really important. And number 2, keep in mind that it's very, very recommended also to do valuation. That means an appraisal of the property to see exactly what is the value. So keep in mind those 2 things. Again, I don't want to give many examples, but in general, it is recommended for sure, depending the case. In some cases, it's very there is no need at all. So I don't want you to spend your money for no reason. So now we spoke about the 4 points of the general to all of you, to all of the people. Now I want to speak with you about the last 3 points that are related especially to you as a foreigners that want to buy a property in Israel. So number 5, opening a bank account. So in order to buy a property in Israel, you have to have money in Israel. And in order to have money in Israel, you have to have a bank account in Israel, or to use any other tool. Many companies that do that in order to wire funds to Israel. So when I'm saying opening a bank account, you can either opening a real bank account. My office help with that a lot, and we do this all the time. And also you can use any company. Just there are many companies that do that. Israel Transfer, many others that create opening of tools, some kind look like an account that will help you to wire funds to Israel. So this is number 5. And even if someone, this is also very important, even if you think to buy in 2 months, in 3 months, do it already, because you don't want to lose the opportunity. The seller will not have the patience. So do it. Open a bank account, speak with Israel Transfer, with any other company, speak with Rafi, speak with people that will help you to open up the account. Number 6, after you have the account, you need to send the money to Israel, for sure. And 1 second, someone just calling me here. Okay. Number 6, sending the funds to Israel for sure. Also now the dollar is very, very strong. So also if you have you have thoughts to buy a property in the future, you can even do it now. You can also save a lot of money. Now the dollar is very, very strong. And number 7, you need to nominate someone that represents you. And when I'm saying this, I didn't mean only as a lawyer, but someone that will pay all your bills, pay the tax, sign on the contract, do all of that. So many people use my office for that. But some people, use their sister-in-law that in Israel, or the sister or the brother. So that's the idea, and that's the main things that you need to remember. The 3 takeaway points from this presentation is actually to transfer your funds to Israel. We spoke about that. To get pre-approval for a mortgage, we didn't speak about that. Natan will speak about that, and also hire a lawyer in Israel. Okay, so I wish you really hatzlacha rabah. These are my details. And I'm here to any questions that anyone wants, and you can feel free to write me WhatsApp, email, or whatever you need. So,
Thank you very much, Abraham. And one thing I forgot to mention with Abraham is Abraham specializes in helping Anglos and foreign buyers. And that's so important. We've worked with people who have worked with Israeli lawyers who aren't familiar with the nuances of the law and the taxes. And so whoever you end up working with, make sure that they really understand the implications of either buying from abroad or somebody that's made Aliyah and living in Israel, so that you get the most relevant and the best advice. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Natan Nagar, who's going to talk about mortgages and how this reduced tax also impacts your overall payments throughout the life of a mortgage.
Right. Thanks so much, Rafi. What I really want to try and double click on in this presentation is the specific effects of the change in the taxes on what that could do for your mortgage. On a fundamental level, a mortgage is a mortgage is a mortgage. You need to buy a property. The bank is willing to extend you financing for that, and using the home as a backup, everybody feels safe going into the deal. But the details are really, really important here. And the details are those that make a difference. So if we move on to the next slide, generally what people are used to is they're used to the 30-year fixed rate. But here in Israel, you have a lot more options than just the 30-year fixed rate. You can change, among other things, the duration. You can actually have different subloans that are not fixed, indexed to inflation, not indexed to inflation. But if we move on to the next slide, one of the biggest things is you can have different durations, and that's going to actually have a profound effect on your mortgage. So moving through the next couple of slides, initially you'd think that it's just the tax, but it's not, right? And the reason for that is something known as compound interest. If you can move on to the next slide, right? So because you're getting, let's just pick a price point of 4 million shekels. If you're buying at 4 million shekels, right, then you have savings of around 100,000 shekels. And if you have 100,000 shekels, you'd think that your savings stop there. You've already saved your 100,000 shekels, and that's really where it ends up. But that's actually not the case. There's actually a ripple effect, which snowballs in your mortgage. And if we move to the next slide, I really want to double in on the numbers that we have over here. We have a few numbers. Essentially, what we're looking at is a mortgage with a monthly payment of 17,500. And on the left side of the screen, you can see that it says 2,261,000 shekels. That's the bottom line. That's what you're paying the bank in interest at the end of your mortgage. Throughout the lifetime of the mortgage, your monthly payments are going to be made up of both principal and interest. And if you sum all of those concurring interest payments, then that's going to come out to a pretty hefty sum of 2,261,000 shekels. What's that looking like in terms of your mortgage? You're going to have a mortgage of around 3 million shekels. It's going to be a fixed rate. In Hebrew, it's known as kvu'a lo tzmuda, which means that basically your rate does not change. And it's going to last for, let's say, 25 years or 300 months, okay? If you do the math, I promise you that if you divide by 12, it ends up as 25 years. And your interest rate is a 5% fixed rate, okay? So if we just take from this two numbers, it's going to be 17,500 for your monthly payments. And on your 3 million shekel, you're going to be paying bottom line 2.261 million shekels. So moving on to the next slide, what happens if we decide instead of 3 million shekels to only take out a mortgage of 2.9 million shekels. And why is that? Because you've saved 100,000 shekels in taxes. So you now have effectively a larger down payment and less of a need to take out a 3 million shekel mortgage. Now we're bumping it down to 2.9. We're keeping everything the same, right? We're keeping a fixed rate. It's going to be 5%. It's going to be for 300 months or 25 years. But notice that on the top right, it's 16,900 as opposed to previously 17,500. So think a 600 difference. And then on the top left, instead of 2.26, we're looking at 2.185 million shekels. So already you're looking at 75,000 shekels. I guess it depends on where the dollar to shekel is, but you're looking at around a $25,000 savings. And that's pretty good in and of itself, but there's more work to be done here. And if we move through the next couple of slides, we can really see where that goes. So number one, smaller mortgage, less to pay in interest. I think that makes sense intuitively. But moving on to the next slide, not just the lower monthly payments, but again, moving on to the next slide, you can readjust to the original monthly payments, right? So originally you were paying 17,500. Now you're paying 16,900. What happens if we bump up the 2.9 million shekel mortgage to 17,500? What does that look like? So the only numbers that have really changed, instead of 300 months, we're looking at 282 months, which is 28 and a half years. We've kept the same 5% interest rate, the same 2.9 million shekel mortgage. But what we're now looking at is instead of 2.185, we're looking at the top left corner at 2,035,000 shekels. That's 150,000 shekel difference in addition to the original 75,000 shekel difference. The original number was 2.61 million. Now we're looking at 2,035,000. So what I really want to get into, if we move to the next two slides, is why is that the case? And the reason that that's the case, moving another two slides, is because if we really double down in the next two slides at what the actual mortgage looks like on a monthly basis, right? We have that graph on the left. That graph is basically your 17,500 shekels on a monthly basis, broken down into two components. The first component is in blue, it's your principal. And the second component in red is your interest. I guess red is interest because it denotes bad. But for our intents and purposes, one of the interesting things to note is that red is much higher in the beginning than your blue, which already is not the best thing. But interestingly enough, it goes down over time. If you take any one of those, two adjacent bars, they both add up to 17,500, right? So your first blue bar all the way on the left is going to be around, let's say, 5,500. And your red bar is going to be around 12,000 shekels. If you add those two together, you end up at your monthly payments of 17,500 shekels. But what happens is that because of the way that the interest really works, you're actually paying less interest over time. And that's an interesting thing because you think that with a 5% fixed rate, you have a fixed rate, which means that your interest shouldn't change over time, but that's actually not the case. Here's what's really happening. It's not a 5% interest in a bubble. It's 5% as a part of your principal. And if your principal goes down over time, because, for example, you're paying off monthly payments, then your 5% of your total principal is also going to go down over time in turn. So originally you have a pretty large mortgage of, let's say, 2.9 million shekels. 5% of 2.9 is going to end up being a pretty large number. But as you enter your last year and you basically have, let's say, 100,000 shekels left to pay off, that's a far cry from your 2.9 million shekels. 5% of 100,000 is going to be a much smaller number. And the interesting thing is, as you move through the payments throughout the years of your mortgage, and as the interest goes down over time, that leaves more and more room for you to be paying off your principal. That's why in concurrence, you have the blue bars going up because you've set your cap, your ceiling, so to speak, at 17,500. But if your interest payments are now lower because you've paid up, there's a snowballing effect where you now have more room to continue paying principal, but this time even more principal. So you have those two actions happening at the same time, where you have both your initial principal making those smaller monthly payments and taking away from the larger principal of the mortgage, and your interest rate going down over time as your mortgage gets paid off. That's really where it's coming from. You're taking out the same 2.9 million shekels. You have the same 5% interest rate, but all of a sudden you have savings that amount to around 230,000 shekels. And the reason for that is not just the original 100,000 shekels that you don't end up paying, but it's really because there's a compounding effect. There's a snowballing effect where you're able to pay off on a more efficient rate your mortgage. Your interest payments are going to come in turn. So if we move on to the next slide, and the one after that as well, right? Your real goal should be efficient monthly payments, which is going to elicit an efficient mortgage, okay? What we've really done is we've looked at one of the parameters where you're able to change just the duration, which in turn is going to change your monthly payments, which in turn is going to change your bottom line for how much you're totally paying the bank at the end of the mortgage. There are a lot of different options, right? If we started out with a 30-year fixed rate, and I mentioned that there are different durations, there are also different subloans to take into account. And you can actually have multiple subloans in your mortgage, right? You can break it up into a few different, what's known as tranches, but I like subloans because it's a bit more of an easier, more palatable term. And you can have those different subloans be comprised of either a fixed rate or a variable rate, index or not index. You have a lot of flexibility in tailoring your mortgage to your needs. And that's going to actually give you a very, very, very efficient mortgage, one that is going to both balance your standard of living and what you want from your life as you move through life with a mortgage, but at the same time, also give you a better bottom line 20, 30 years down the road. A few practicalities about mortgages. If you haven't already realized that mortgages in Israel are different than the standard mortgages, then there are a few more things that make them different. One of them is they take a lot of time to take out. One of my clients that I just recently dealt with is a UK mortgage advisor, and he called me up on the day that he signed his contract, and he said, "Okay, Natan, it's time to take out the mortgage." And I said, "Hold up, it doesn't quite work like that." So mortgages take around 3 months. Step one is really to build a budget. Even before you go shopping, you want to know what you can actually buy and get pre-approval, as Avra mentioned, before you actually sign on the contract. Really, it's about planning ahead, and if you're not sure, asking. As Avra mentioned, and as Rafi has also mentioned, and I know that this is true with Darren as well, we're all here and we're all available to really be there for you guys. And to really broaden your perspective. Rafi is amazing at this. If there's other professionals, then you can reach out and ask and see what help we can provide. Thanks so much.
Great, Natan. Thank you so much. And here's Natan's information. And again, we'll have it at the end. Okay, Darren, you're up.
Hi, everybody, wherever we are in the world. So my name is Darren from home in Israel, Kelly Williams, based in Netanya. I'm pleased to be part of this webinar with Rafi, Avram, and Natan. Since the 7th of October, the Israeli real estate market has been through various challenges. We have clients that called us to see have prices dropped. And, I answer them all the same way. In Israel, prices in Israel don't drop. Sometimes they do level up, but they don't drop. And historically, they don't. So since that day, the anti-Semitism across the world has resulted in a big increase of Aliyah from many, many, many different countries. And we're seeing younger families coming with children, retired people close to retirement, really across the board. Some are considering the move prior, and then they decided, okay, with what's going on overseas, outside of Israel, they brought the whole process closer. And during a war, one might be surprised to find out that so many people coming to live in a country that is essentially at war. But Israel is the only Jewish state, and Jews from all over the world feel safe here, and they choose to make it their home. So during the last during the last 10 months, the amount of sales directly from developers increased dramatically to a much higher level than was even well before the war. And this was mainly due to the attractive payment terms and attractive terms in the contract that really made it very interesting and attractive for people to buy something under construction. One of the main things was when buying on paper, all unpaid amounts are linked to the index, which it's a government tax that over a 3-year period, it could be 3-4%, maybe 5%. It depends on the index at the time. So the government chose to cancel that. So it made it very black and white for people. The price they buy, that's the price they pay. So as I said, a lot of people chose to buy like that. And about 4 months ago, we as a company, we travel a lot. We travel to the US, Canada, we travel to England, lots of other countries. So about 4 months ago, we chose to travel again. This was purely due to the demand of people wanting to see us, they wanting to ask questions, they needed answers for questions they had. And it's not always so easy to do it on a webinar or Zoom. So we chose to go. We went to Canada, and we went to New York for just over a week, and we had a very big turnout. And we sold units there for people that were forward planning, and some others that just want to have a foot in Israel and to make Aliyah in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. They felt very uneasy living where they live, and they just wanted a foothold in Israel. And some would say mortgages, some will not. It just depends. But the situation certainly changed their minds and the forward planning, and the way they feel living in an area they've been happy to call home for many years. Now they feel uneasy what's going on there. We've heard so many stories from our clients. The general feeling is to come to Israel at war than to stay in a hostile environment. As Avron spoke about the new purchase tax laws, I'm just going to talk about how it's affected the market and how it's going to affect purchases. The financial saving is huge, and it hasn't been seen here before. So as clients are starting the Aliyah process and they're talking about it, the finances are a very important factor. And normally, let's say prior to Aliyah, or even to buy, let's say as a non-Israeli, the purchasing tax was always 8%. As an Oleh Hadash, it was less, but now it's dramatically less. So it makes a big saving. So if, for instance, anyone is considering buying from a developer where the building is not completed, you can take advantage of this new law, which Avram spoke a lot about. So since the announcement of the tax law that's due to come in this week, us as an office, the inquiries have just tripled. Within a few weeks, have just tripled. And as we know, at the moment, it's a buyer's market for the first time in many years in Israel, with a limited supply of certainly resale homes that's available for immediate occupation. We also have several groups, maybe friends or family, it depends, looking to make Aliyah in the same few years and to build a community with a shul and all the amenities to suit them. We've done it a couple of times over the years, but there seems to be more interest now as people of all the same age group, the same kehillah, are talking about coming and bringing what they have where they live now to Israel. So as you can see, since this announcement, the demand has increased a lot. And we believe that once the war, please God, it happens very quickly, is finished, the increase of demand will just be huge, as it's proven historically. Thankfully, we have had quite a few wars in our history, and each time there is a war, the demand from outside of Israel and inside Israel, as it comes to the end or even afterwards, always increases. And a regular question that people always ask me is, when's the best time to buy? Is it summer? Is it the winter? I always answer, it actually doesn't matter, but yesterday was the best time. Okay, tomorrow is not a good time. It was yesterday. The amount of people we've had over the last, I don't know, 10, 12, 15 years, and they said, I wish I'd have bought a year ago. So they come every few years and they said, it goes up. I said, look, try and make it happen. Because if you don't, we'll be having this conversation in another 3 or 4 years, and you'll be paying a lot more, or you may even be priced out of where you want to live. So you got to, the area one chooses to live is really, really important. And all 4 of us on this panel tonight understand the importance of that. So if one gets priced out of the market because of waiting, you know, it's not a good idea. So if one's able to buy now, even on paper, try and buy. I said to a client last week, the very worst case scenario is you will make money and you'll sell it. You have a foot in the market. As we spoke before, the dollar is strong at the minute. You'll be changing your dollars into shekels and putting into property. The property always increases. So in a period of, I don't know, 3 or 4 year build of a new construction, the apartments should be worth historically 20–25% more. And the dollar, we don't know where the dollar is going to go. We know what it is today. So as I say, now's the best time. And with all the help of Rafi and everybody else on this panel, our job is to make life as easy and simple as possible. The most successful aliyah that people can make is to choose the correct people around them. From a lawyer, from Rafi with his advice, from changing the money, from taking a mortgage. Get the right people around you. The whole process works very, very smoothly, and there's no pitfalls. So on that note, I wish everybody good luck, and thank you for joining.
Thank you, Darren. And I just want to add just a couple of comments to what Darren said. From our visibility, from our perspective here at Olim Advisors, we're seeing a lot of people who are looking to make Aliyah or return to Israel, not now while the war's going on, but end of 2024, 2025 and beyond. And I think when you look at real estate prices, it's very simple. It comes down to supply and demand. And so as more and more people are moving, and again, keep in mind, there's so many Israelis around the world who are moving here. And now with the discount on purchase tax, it's simply going to increase the demand, which is going to increase the pressure on pricing. Pricing will go up. So I completely agree with Darren. You know, there's a lot of opportunities. Netanya, with Darren focused, is a beautiful city, but there's a lot of opportunities throughout the country. And I think the key here is to take that first step. You don't have to decide tomorrow that you're going to buy something, but take the first step. Reach out to us. Let's figure out a budget. Let's figure out what your status is and how you can take advantage of this, and making sure you're working with the right team. So thank you, everyone, for joining. What I'd like to do now is just put up the poll again for a moment while I look at the questions, and we'll take some of the questions. So I'm just going to stop the sharing. And if you didn't get a chance to answer the question beforehand, then if you can just do that for us, that'll be great. Natan, Darren, can you see the poll again popping up? Okay, here's just the contact information for everyone as well. I'm just going to look at the questions, and we'll take a few minutes and go through some of the questions. There's a question here, Abraham, for a husband and wife, if they buy the property in the wife's name and then they want to buy it in the husband's name, and so there's another property, can they both take advantage of it, or is it per family unit? Abraham, you're on mute.
Thank you. I'm saying in general, it is a family advantage. You cannot use it 2 times. In order to use it 2 times, you need to stand in very strict conditions. So to show a complete separation, financial separation between the husband and the wife. So in general, for the simple answer for this webinar, the answer is 1 benefit for 1 family. Okay.
Okay, but here in another situation, another question, the wife made Aliyah 5.5 years ago, so she's still eligible for the 7-year window, but the husband made Aliyah 18 years ago. So would they be still eligible?
So it is a family benefit, but it's sufficient that one of the couple will do Aliyah in the time frame that we just explained during the webinar. So if one of the couple did Aliyah in the time that we explained, so yeah, that's sufficient. And for sure, only one property for the couple and no properties before the purchase itself, as we explained.
Okay, Darren, a question for you. It says, is the tax included in the published price, or is it over and above that? And then who do they make the payment to?
The purchase tax.
Yeah, so when somebody says the apartment is, say, 3 million shekel, the question is, does that 3 million shekel include the purchase tax? And then who do you make the purchase tax to? Who gets paid?
Okay, the purchase tax is payable to the Israeli tax authorities, and it's due 45 days after signing the contract. Normally, Abraham, if he's acting on behalf of a client, can make that payment, or if you're here in Israel, it can be made directly. This is not included in the purchase price. Any new construction includes VAT, but in a resale home, there's no VAT. I hope that answers the question.
It does. And just to clarify, the VAT is 17% in Israel. So when you're doing your budget, that is an important to keep in mind. Avraham, there's a question here about the definition of purchase, and I know this come up with clients that we've referred to you. Is it from when you sign the agreement or from when you take purchase? So let's say if you're, you're buying an apartment and you sign it, but then the seller wants to stay in the apartment for a year, they want to rent it from you. When does that clock start ticking? From when you sign it or from when you actually move into the apartment?
Thanks, Rafi. It's a very good question. So the time frame that we explained is from the signing, no from occupation of the property. A year before signing, you need to do Aliyah after a year from the signing, or up till 7 years from the time you did Aliyah, you can use the advantage of signing a contract, right? And yeah, we're not speaking about occupation of the property.
Okay. Natan, there's a question here about refinancing. It says, can a mortgage be refinanced if interest rates improve? What fees are involved? So without getting into all these fees, but if you can talk about, I know a lot of people in the States and other countries are used to refinancing if the rates improve. What's the situation like that in Israel?
Yeah, so that's, first of all, a really good question. You're always able to refinance, but it does come with a price tag known as a prepayment penalty. The penalty is something that's a bit complicated to explain. So I'll answer the question by saying that it exists. And if you want to find out more, then feel free to reach out to Rafi, get my contact information. It just changes depending on which subloans you use and what durations you have, so on and so forth.
Okay. Darren, there's a question for you, just from your experience. What do interior designers typically charge if they want to furnish an apartment? So if you're buying an empty apartment, as the Israeli apartments are, and you want to hire somebody to furnish it, what do interior decorators, designers usually charge?
It depends what someone interprets an interior designer, whether it's an architect to begin the process, let's say buying on paper that's not built yet, they've got to draw plans and they've got to do furniture plans and all that. Maybe it's just somebody who's going to help somebody bring an apartment together with buying furniture and furnishings. They normally charge about, depends really how many hours are involved. It can be maybe 30-something thousand shekels, something like that.
Okay. Natan, there's a question here about insurance. When you take out a mortgage, and very often the banks will require you to get insurance. Can you just talk about that briefly? What type of insurance you need, and typically, if you know what the premium, what the cost of the insurance is?
So I'll start with the last question. The cost of the insurance really changes based on your health situation and your age and those factors. Regarding, you can get an exception for the life insurance. You don't always have to get it, and it depends how you set up your mortgage as well. 67, I saw in the question, is also a fairly young age, so there may be a way of getting around it, but that's going to change depending on your specific situation. You can get a pensioner's mortgage, you can get a regular's mortgage. That opens a whole can of worms in and of itself, and I suggest really reaching out to Rafi. Yeah.
Okay. And then in terms of the age, banks traditionally offer the mortgage up until the age of 80, right? But there are alternative finance.
There are alternatives. Sometimes they'll offer until 82, sometimes until 85. that goes hand in hand. It's not the age limit for when you qualify, it's the age limit for when your mortgage ends. And that's definitely a question, Asher, that I'd love to explain on one-on-one, because it's a can of worms unto itself. It really is.
Okay. Avram, there's a question here about if somebody's making Aliyah within a year, so they buy the property within a year before Aliyah, do they have to pay the foreign resident tax rate and then claim the refund once they make Aliyah? Is that how the process works?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, in general, what I direct my clients to do is to pay the 8%, sorry, of the tax for foreigners, and then when the actual buyer is doing Aliyah, we reclaim the money and we get it back from the tax with interest and index. So it's actually very good saving. You need to know the tax authority pays you with 4 or 5% annual interest. It's very good.
Okay. There's a question here about limits on how much money you can transfer to buy an apartment, and there are no limits. Of course, everything has to be documented, but you can transfer $5 million, $10 million if you want to, if you have it. And we do work with a company where you can get discounted exchange rates, and that's of course a big important thing to look at, the costs of transferring money, exchanging money, and transferring money to Israel. But there aren't limits to that. One point I just want to clarify and stress, because it's important. A lot of times people will ask me, well, let's say if I'm a foreign buyer, should I wait until I make Aliyah to get advantage of the discounted purchase tax? And when I tell them, let's say if they wait a year or 2 years and then make Aliyah and get the discounted rate, properties most likely will increase by more than that 8% over that year, 2, 3 years down the road. And so I always tell people, as Darren mentioned, if you are ready to take that step forward and to buy a property, it's always better to do it now, because prices will more often than not appreciate year over year. And if you wait 2, 3 years, you're going to be kicking yourself, because you're going to realize that the price has increased a lot and you might be priced out of the market. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And also keep in mind that there's so many people that are making Aliyah, buying properties, and then they're going back and forth. When you do that, there's no requirement for you to stay in Israel forever. There are requirements that you stay in Israel for at least 183 days out of the year. So it's a half a year. So they want people to make Aliyah, buy a property, get the discounted purchase tax, say thank you very much, and then go back to the US, UK, or South Africa. So there are limits on how long you have to be in Israel to benefit from this. But there's so many people that we help and that we guide through the process who, in essence, go back and forth. They have family, businesses, vacation, whatever. So I don't want you to think that if you make Aliyah, it's a one-way ticket, that you can't, in essence, have the best of both worlds. And we see more and more people, especially after COVID, more and more people who are buying properties in Israel as vacation homes and going back and forth. And I think the key, and in essence, to sum it up, the key is that this process is definitely something that is manageable, definitely something that is doable. But 2 things you have to keep in mind. First of all, it's really up to you to take that first step. It's up for you to come to that decision and say, you know what, we want to do this. We want to start the process. And then the next step is, don't do it alone. Reach out to us. As you can see, we have a wealth of information. We have the desire. We want to help you. And we want to make sure that you can realize your dream, whether it's to buy a home in Israel, make Aliyah, or both. So thanks again so much, Darren, to you, to Natan, and to Avram. Thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight. Thank you for your advice and for your guidance. And to all of you, we want to wish you a safe week. If you're fasting on Tisha B'Av, we hope that it's an easy fast, a meaningful fast. And please God, we will all have a safe and quiet week. So take care, everyone. Be well and take care.